Benefactor underwriting for this broadcast has been provided by a grant from Republic Bank. The power of red is back. Major underwriting support for this broadcast has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, Marks Paneth. Additional underwriting support has been provided by grants from AmTrust Title, Bank of America, Capital One Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, the One Stop Property Group, and these friends. The Upper East Side, Yorkville, Florida part-time. I'm going to be a chef. I don't know why, but I'm going to be a chef. I'm going to go to the Culinary Art Institute. I'm going to go to La Costa. Nah, I'm going to be a French chef. I'm going to get involved with La Côte Basque, okay, and Lutèce. No, it's about time. I want to open up my own place. I like the Store Club, the Club Room. Nah, one restaurant's not enough. I got to create City Hall. What's next? I don't know. It's about time to go into the wine and spirit business. I have Henry Meir. Thanks for being here today.
Michael, it's a pleasure to be sitting in your chair.
So tell me a little bit about your grandparents. It was interesting. You mentioned MGM, and recently MGM Studios was acquired by Amazon. So
yeah. Well, it was before Amazon even.
Yes, I realize.
My grandfather was living in Berlin, and he was head of European distribution for MGM. So that's where my mother and my grandmother lived, immediately prior to the war.
So when did they come over?
I think they came over in 38, maybe 36.
And they migrated to?
New York City.
Okay, but where at that time? The West Side?
79th Street.
So it was originally in New Yorkville?
Yeah, between 3rd and Lexington.
Okay, and tell me about Dad's side.
Dad's side was from a place called Lviv, which was part of Poland. My grandfather was a religious Jew, came from a family of rabbis. They came over in, I think, 33. An interesting story that at age 13, my father and grandmother went back to Poland to visit family, and they left a week before Poland was invaded by the Nazis. So it was
very fortuitous that they came back.
Without a doubt.
So tell me what Grandpa did when he over here.
What I remember is immediately upon arriving to New York, my grandfather he was in the egg business. So he would, I remember him telling me that in the basement, he was a middleman for selling eggs. So they had a candle, they put the egg up to the candle to make sure it was a good egg, and then he hustled the eggs to somebody else. And I guess he did pretty well in the egg business, and he moved to Manhattan, Upper West Side, 95th Street in Columbus.
Okay, and let's talk about the other side of the family. How they?
He stayed with MGM, I think, until soon before he died. I'm actually named after my grandfather. My grandfather's named Henry Kahn, and I'm Henry Meir. So
tell me about your parents, your mom and then your dad, because there's a lot to talk about with your dad.
Well, mom and dad are single kids. Grew up in didn't grow up in Manhattan, but grew up in Queens. They lived probably a normal, immigrant family's life. Went to public high school. My dad was pretty smart, so he went into business, started working on Wall Street, and my mom was, just a homemaker.
So what did your dad do on Wall Street originally?
Originally, I think he worked in a number of smaller firms, and then he landed a job at American Express. My dad was my hero. He really was courageous and super smart, and he developed and started American Express's International Foreign Exchange Division. That was back in the early 60s.
So let's talk about his son. Tell me about where you were born.
His son's a kid from Yorkville on the Upper East Side.
Right, now this was, as we said, this is 78th Street and 2nd Avenue, right?
79 between Lexington and 3rd.
Okay.
And yeah, that was, what a great time. That was in the 60s. I was born in 56, so don't do the math. But it was...
Where'd you go to public school?
PS6.
So you went to PS6 and then you went to private school.
But then I went to private school. Then I guess my parents felt that, I wanted to have the opportunity to go to private school. So I went to a Waldorf school called the Rudolf Steiner School, which is on 79th Street. Rudolf Steiner was a huge challenge for me. This was mid-60s. It was very art-driven. And, we did Eurythmy. Have you ever done Eurythmy? Okay, it's like dance with a copper rod on your head. Not easy for a kid in 6th grade, because I always had a tremendous amount of energy, always ran around. And they had workshop too, which was also a challenge for a Jewish kid in Manhattan. How do you make a round ball out of a square piece of wood? Took me a whole year to figure it out.
Tell me about the summers growing up in the Yorkville section.
Summers early 60s. We were, I remember we went out to a place called Amagansett. You
were there before Amagansett became very popular.
It without a doubt. I think we were one of 12 houses in the dunes. And it was wonderful. I never had experienced that type of life, waking up in your bed with your bed filled with sand and going out and picking bayberries.
You were 2 blocks away from the subway on 77th Street, so
right.
It was a different world.
Completely. And I love the beach and the water, so it was, and it gave us as a family to spend time together. I have a younger sister, so it was absolutely wonderful. I remember seeing my first happening on the beach in 1965. All these hippies running around, just being happy.
Now, you said to me your parents got divorced, okay, and your mother moved to Florida.
Right. Got divorced on my right after I was bar mitzvah, back in 1969.
And your mother moved to Florida immediately?
Not immediately. A year after, went to a place called Sarasota, which back then was a sleepy kind of fishing village. Wonderful, stupendous. So my sister went down to Florida with my mom, and so did I.
So you lived in Florida for a period?
For about a half a year, until my mother said, it's time for you to move back to live with your dad. I had missed all my friends. I probably wasn't as well behaved as I should have been. So my mom threw me on a Greyhound bus, gave me $20 and said, get off in Manhattan. So, and I didn't have a cell phone back then.
So how'd you find your dad?
Well, I knew where he was living, so.
You woke him up one day saying, Pop, I'm here?
I think my mother warned him that I was coming back to live, which I think at the end of the day I was happy with, because I got to see all my old friends. I lived with my father, which was a great opportunity for us to spend time together.
But that was a great opportunity that really prevailed to put you into the desire to be involved with cooking.
Oh, right? Without a doubt. It catapulted me into it, because as great a cook as my dad was, which he was a good cook, my grandfather used to bring us these bags full of soup in old grapefruit jars with wax paper. And so he was a pretty good cook, and my father kind of enjoyed cooking also. But we went out a lot in Manhattan. He was
He had an expense account, you said.
he had an expense account, and he was single.
So
Forced him.
at that time, which restaurants did you frequent?
Oh, that's a great question. I remember going to a place called Le Veau d'Or, which was lots of fun. Mussels, moule moutarde. This was a freebie.
So they were French? Most of the restaurants were French, would you say?
Some of them were French. He also loved going down to Greenwich Village because it was young, it was hip, it was lively. And I remember, I think that's where he introduced me to alcohol. It was like when I was 15, we went to a bar and he thought he was teaching me how to drink, but I had been drinking for 3 years prior to that anyway. So
you graduated high school when?
74.
Okay, it's 1974, and you decide, since mom's down in Florida, that you go down to the University of Florida.
Exactly, in Gainesville. I'd always, I still in the back of my mind, wanted to be a chef, wanted to be in the restaurant business.
But did that come out from the visits that your father and you at the restaurants, or was it any? You said your father was a good chef. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he cooked, but I think he'd rather go out. But he had just started a business that was going to allow him to, after a few years, to have a lot of free time. So we had discussions actually in that Greenwich Village restaurant, which I don't remember the name of saying, hey, let's go into the restaurant business. Isn't this fun?
But this is before you went to the Culinary Institute.
Way before. This was probably 72, 73. And it was a great dream. It was something I held on to for my entire life. But I did go to Gainesville because I wasn't ready to focus and commit to my career. I love political science, and I wanted to just hang out.
So how do you wake up one day and say, I want to go to the Culinary Art Institute?
But unfortunately, after my freshman year, he and I were on vacation down in Guadeloupe, and he suffered a massive stroke, which threw my world up completely. It was earth-shattering for me. So I dropped out of University of Florida and went and spent almost 2 years with him here in New York while he was going through rehab. He was at Rusk Institute. I mean, the kind of dad my dad was, the kind of man he was at Rusk Institute on 34th Street. We were living on 94th. And my dad was there 6-8 months. He'd had enough. One Christmas day, he gets in his wheelchair, rolls down to First Avenue, hails a cab. Again, remember, partially paralyzed, unable to speak, and gets himself up to 94th Street in Lexington. How he told the cab driver to get there, no idea, but he had enough. So that was how courageous and how focused my father was. So I held on to that dream of wanting to be in the restaurant business.
So what year do you go to CIA?
CIA was, I looked at, Michael, I looked at CIA as an entree into restaurants. I knew I wanted to work in French restaurants because I felt that they were the foundation of cooking. And I thought CIA would help me get into them. So CIA was 78, I think, is when I started CIA.
Right, now CIA has, you go to school and then you work.
Right. You have an externship.
Externship.
Which was awesome.
Which was at Lacoste?
At La Côte Basque.
La Côte Basque.
La Côte Basque, yeah. La Costa was in California. I was living there.
So tell us about the initial time at La Côte Basque.
I had to pick a restaurant I wanted to work in. So I walked into La Côte Basque knowing nothing about French food other than liking moules, moutarde. And I walk into this restaurant on 55th Street across from the St. Regis, and I cried, because here's this most beautiful restaurant I had ever seen. Bernard Lamotte, pictures on the wall, beautiful table lamps, everybody looked beautiful. And I looked at the pastry card, and this was January. In the middle of January, this huge bowl of raspberries. And I said, this is where I want to work.
But what happened was the owner didn't consider you a chef. He looked down at you, right?
Well, he didn't look down at me, but I mean, Jean-Jacques Rachou, who is, I owe everything to, as well as Andre Saltner. I mean, these are my mentors, my teachers, sometimes my parents, sometimes my rabbis. But I walked into Rachou, and his English wasn't so good, and my English isn't so good. So I spoke. I said, I'm CIA, will you hire me? And he was the first chef to start hiring Americans for their French kitchens. I mean, Charlie Palmer was there, Rick Moonen was there, Frank Crispo, all these Americans that did pretty well in their careers, but he was the first one. So we were almost a completely American kitchen. So he hired me. I was making $199 a week. I was working about 70, 80 hours a week, loving every minute of it. I was making soufflés, but I had all this energy. So if I wasn't busy at soufflés, I'd go to Garde Manger, I'd do whatever I could to help. My first real restaurant job. So yeah, Rachou comes over to me, it's like 10:30. I'm at Garde Manger doing something, prep work, and he goes, so you want to be a chef? And this is the first thing he said to me in 6 months. And I said, yeah, chef. I know I don't know very, and I had diarrhea of the mouth. And he said, looked at me, he says, you'll never be a chef. And so I said, what? He says, you'll never be a chef. So this was hazing. So, there's no crying in French restaurants. So I looked at him and I said, well, chef, I hope you're wrong. Ran into the bathroom and bawled my eyes out. But that being said, the next morning, I was back at the restaurant an hour before he showed up. He walks in, he goes, what are you doing here? Because I didn't think he thought I was coming back. I said, well, I said my wife kicked me out. I love him. He has taught me so much, gave me...
so how'd you leave him and go to...
Lutèce. That was a tough decision. It was about 8 years into it. I'm very much a creature of habit. Today chefs move after, every 2 months. I worked 2 restaurants for 18 years. A friend of mine was leaving Lutèce. He was the Garde Manger chef. At that point, I was sous chef at Le Coq Basque. And Carrie said to me, he says, Henry, I'm leaving Lutèce. You should come work here.
So when is Lacoste?
Lacoste is before. Lacoste is right before culinary school, right before CIA. And that was, I went to live with a friend in San Diego, North County, Encinitas, North County of San Diego. I needed a job. I wanted to cook. So I worked at Lacoste, which was this Teamster kind of hangout.
Right. So you're at Lutèce. What happens next?
Well, I didn't get to Lutèce yet. I'm still at Le Coq Basque trying to get the job. If I'm focused on something, I'm tenacious. I come down, I get to Lutèce a Tuesday morning, wait in the bar for the chef to come down, because the chef lived upstairs. And that kind of translates to another part of my life a little later. Is the chef and Madame lived upstairs. Andre Saltner lived in the brownstone. So he comes down in his slippers and his T-shirt, and he looks at me and goes, who are you? And I said, well, my name's Henry Meir. I hear Carrie's leaving, blah, blah, blah. I want his job. And he says, well, what are you doing now? He's a sous chef at Le Coq Basque. He says, well, why are you coming to make salads? And I said, well, I want to come work for you. He was suspicious that I was just going to stay for a couple of months just to get Lutèce on my resume. He says, well, I don't know. You're also too big for the kitchen. Lutèce was a small place.
Right. If you were 5'6", it would have been okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not. And I'm actually, well, anyway. So he says, well, let me think about it. Wednesday morning, I'm in the bar. He comes walking down. He goes, who are you? And we went through the whole song and dance. He says, well, I haven't thought about it. I said, okay, well, I want to think about it, chef. I really want to work here. He says, okay. Thursday morning, I show up. I'm still there. He looks at me. He goes, okay, I'll call Rachou. Because also remember, Michael, back then, the great French restaurants, there were a handful.
Yeah, they were like a fraternity of each other.
Exactly.
And you really couldn't step on and rob one of the chefs.
Not at all. Okay. And I would never do that anyway.
Okay, we have to move on.
Okay.
Let's talk about how you decided to leave the restaurants and create your own cub room.
Well, when I got to Lutèce, I watched Chef making an omelet. And it was piece of art. And I said, I'm not leaving Lutece until I'm ready, till I can make an omelet almost as good as Chef Andre's. Took me 10 years to make it almost as good. But it was time. I was there 10 years. I had risen up to, sous chef there. And in 1993, I started looking for spaces, having no idea what I was looking for or what I needed. Because again, I remember I worked for small restaurants. I never worked for a corporation. So a restaurant, not a restaurant, but there's a space I had seen for a decade down on Princeton Sullivan Street, right next to a small cafe called Elephant and Castle. So I looked at it. I spoke to the landlord, which was a protracted discussion for weeks. And finally, he says, okay, I'll rent it to you. Again, having no idea what I was really doing.
Was it going to be a French restaurant?
At that time in the restaurant scene, the farm table was really important. So it's going to be more Franco-American, French in style, but with the use of American ingredients.
So when does it open?
October '94, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so then while you're having the cub room, how do you decide to go to City Hall?
City Hall, actually.
City Hall.
City Hall was located on
Right.
Duane Street in Tribeca. The space there were two restaurants. Somebody said, hey, you should look at this. As a restaurant space, it was two restaurants, an Indian restaurant, Italian restaurant. They had long terms left on their leases. So I said, well, maybe I can come and I need to get both spaces, because the jewel of City Hall was the Granite Room, one of the private dining rooms downstairs, which was the old coal room. The building was built in 1863. It used to be a shoe factory. Cast iron columns galore, 18-foot ceilings. But the private dining rooms is where I thought we'd be able to make some shekels.
So when do you open up City Hall?
City Hall opens end of '97.
Now, City Hall became like an establishment that the judges, everybody from downtown would go to City Hall.
Yeah, it was, I kind of like to think it was the Four Seasons of Lower Manhattan. I was very conscious of people's needs. We were very hospitality driven. If the mayor would come, he always sat on table 41. Judge Katzman would sit on table 20. So we were able to develop this relationship where people felt it was as if it was their own dining room.
And every Christmas Eve, what happened?
Christmas Eve was wonderful. This is my wife's idea, to open up our restaurant to homeless mothers and their kids. So since there were so many politicians that were our customers, we worked with the Division of Homeless Services every year. For 17 years, we closed City Hall and treated mothers and their kids to dinner as if you would eat there. No plastic plates. Everybody had cloth napkins, and it was just an amazing experience. And we created a family around that. We had people that would bring their kids as volunteers. Mike Bloomberg came there every year that he was mayor. And it was wonderful to see him and other politicians walking around the dining room.
With like 2 minutes left, I have to talk about your wife and other things.
Yeah.
How'd you meet your wife?
We were set up by a mutual friend, neither of us being interested in the other. She's the strong personality of the family. I think the only reason that she went out with me was because I had 2 tickets to the Pretenders on Broadway. And 27 or 8 years later, the rest is history.
Now, we were talking about the owner of Lutece used to live in the building. You lived in the building.
Yeah, which was just when my daughter was born in 2003, an apartment on the top floor became available at City Hall. So we moved in, and we stayed there until I closed the restaurant in 2015. And it was an amazing experience for my daughter. I mean, she would come down in her pajamas and say goodnight to customers, or come down in pajamas, and we would all have dinner together on table 43. It was just unbelievable.
Okay, 2 things to accomplish before we finish in a minute and a half. tell me about the wine and spirits store and
Okay.
your daughter.
Okay. Pure Liquid Wine and Spirits was opened after I closed City Hall. Again, my life is all about relationships. We had so many relationships with winemakers. The opportunity arose at the Oculus at the World Trade Center to open up a artisan wine and spirit shop, craft driven, and that's open today, still today. And my daughter is, finishing up her freshman year
At Indiana, right?
at Indiana. She's a Hoosier. She's an empowered young woman, and hopefully she's going to change the world.
So over your, the other thing I failed to say, that your father came to the Cub Room, right? He was able to see
Yeah.
the restaurant open.
He did, and it was, again, very, very emotional for me. He was living in Florida, and Cub Room opened, and I was able to fly him up, and he walked in with a cane, and he wasn't able to speak, but yeah.
So it's a nice story about a kid from the Yorkville section, and you've accomplished a lot, and you've helped people out, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Michael.